Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So, one of the questions we get asked here at the FIAC Institute is what are some of the references that we use or that we would recommend that people could use to continue their knowledge about enterprise architecture? And so what we thought we would do is from time to time is review some of these different resources because there's so many great ones that are out there, and maybe provide some insight on what we use and where you can go and some things we think you ought to have in your reference library, of course. Now, a quick word. These are not sponsorships. We're not paid for any of these. Certainly no endorsements or anything along that lines. These are just our professional reviews based upon our own practice as enterprise architects, as well as professional educators. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be reviewing a book by Mark Langhorst and Company entitled Enterprise Architecture at Work, the 4th edition. This particular book, whether you have the 4th edition or an earlier version, is one that really endures over the years. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look inside of this at the table of contents, and we'll share with you some of the key factors of what we really enjoy about this book and why we recommend it in your reference library, either in a hard copy or soft edition. I believe it's also available in Kindle. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this. So for the purposes of this review, we're actually going to take advantage of the Look Inside feature on Amazon. This is a great way, and we always appreciate when authors in general kind of give this insight as to what's in the book as you make an evaluation. Always appreciate it. And so with that, let's actually take a look here. So the book is actually very comprehensive, but it's broken up in such a way that both somebody new to enterprise architecture as well as an experienced practitioner can make use of this book. So chapter 1 and chapter 2, really with the introduction to enterprise architecture, the state of the art, they're giving as much background and history as they are as the factors of why we actually do enterprise architecture itself. Now, as the chapters progress, and they go into chapter 3, foundations, and chapter 4 with communicating the enterprise architecture, they really start focusing on both, the science and the art of architecture itself. So they're talking about the practice itself, the need for semantics, as well as the ability to communicate and that transfer of knowledge. Now, when they talk about the different language for enterprise architecture, it's important to understand that the book does make extensive use of the Archimate enterprise language notation. And this is a great language, but the examples that you're going to see that are relatively well illustrated, again, are going to be in the Archimate language. And with that, they talk a little bit more about some relationships to what we'll refer to as implementation level languages later on, as well as combining Archimate with other standards. And this is really nice, and specifically as a part of chapter 6, when they look at, well, how does Archimate feed into the business motivation model or the balanced scorecard? How does it feed into business process model notation? So all of this is really nice because it's how do we take these enterprise architecture notations and we create these different views as a part of addressing viewpoints and those stakeholder concerns, and how do we actually communicate in a way that may be understood by the rest of the organization who may use different models to communicate, things such as customer journey maps. What's that interface? And so they very much build on your knowledge in a very progressive manner. So it's a well-organized book. Again, it's really held up over the years. This is edition 4, but the 3rd and the 2nd edition are books that I've owned. And again, they're just as relevant today. So they just build on that knowledge and they continue to update. So chapter 7 and 8, guidelines for modeling, as well as viewpoints and visualization, are terrific information. A lot of insight is provided here, factors to consider, how to organize that information, how to shape your models. So there's a lot of discussion on static and dynamic views, and really how to create viewpoints that really talk to the stakeholders in helping to obtain commitment and agreement and developing that decision insight. Now, it's chapter 9 in particular that I feel that this book really brings its greatest value. Specifically because a lot of enterprise architecture books that are out there will talk about the state of the practice, and they'll talk about modeling, and they'll talk about how to depict different things. But they may not necessarily show different analysis techniques. And what's nice with this publication is it really does actually show some way to get some quantitative analysis done with this. And they walk through a rather nice example where they're actually talking in the quantitative modeling, and they take this in a step-by-step technique, and they talk about the mathematics that are actually behind this. And this is key because a lot of times we will see practicing architects who view the models as the end state, and we would argue it's the insight, it's the decision insight that you're able to give those customers that is really what's valued. A lot of times they'll look at these different models, and that has value in itself, but there's a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that's locked away. And what's really nice in chapter 9 is that they go through and they give a qualitative example and how you normalize and how you can get actual calculations, real hard information to inform decision makers and stakeholders based upon the architectural design. They go a little further with some functional design, some dynamic analysis examples, and then they move into some discussion as far as data flow, risk analysis. There's a nice discussion on that and the nature of quantitative analysis, using your architecture views as well to support risk analysis and portfolio analysis. So really what this particular chapter is probably my personal favorite when it comes to this book as a whole, but it's one of these things that's really useful to have. And another interesting chapter is the architectural alignment discussion. What I really like is the alignment phenomenon. He goes through a lot of what Mark and company go through are a lot of the different resources and the different concepts and structures that are out there, such as Conway's Law, and how we deal with the different layers of the architecture itself. Finally, they move into the tool support, some of the factors you want to keep in mind when considering these different tools, especially with the visualization, the case studies, and then a brief discussion on beyond enterprise architecture. So one of the things that I would want to highlight with you is the fact that what this book represents is not just the writings and the viewpoint of a single author. So many different books that are out there are great books, wonderfully researched. But something I would highlight here is the depth of the different authors that have contributed to each of these chapters. This is not a book that's the world according to Mark Langhorst himself, but it's Mark Langhorst and a whole host of other enterprise architecture experts, practitioners, in the field. And not only are they writing from their experience, but it's also important to realize the depth of the research that's gone into the book itself. So I always encourage people, if you want to see, kind of the foundations that any author of a book, any research effort that's been done, is go back to those references and take a look at what they've actually built, the foundations. They'll tell you as you stand on the shoulders of giants. And in what we see with this book is a well-researched effort that goes through and makes extensive use of research, contemporary research that they've continued to update over the years. So this wasn't done just in the first or the second edition, but as the state of the practice continues to evolve for enterprise architect and enterprise architecture itself, whether it's technology, whether it's the modeling notation, the research around this book has continued to also evolve as well. And I believe that's really a part of what makes this particular document something that really helps stand the test of time. As we take a look at the book itself, we can see that it's pretty well illustrated. Some chapters more than other chapters. They're clear, the illustrations themselves. So a lot of times, when we'll receive a publication, the writing may be great, but the illustrations don't best support it or aren't as clear. That is not the case in this book. Again, it's pretty well illustrated. They make use of a lot of different illustrative graphics. And what's also nice with this, as we look at it, is they make use of the research that they've done. So we see here in figure 1.3 as an example. So they bring that research and they integrate it into the writings as a foundation. So, they're explaining this and say, look, here's the approach. Here's what we think you should know, or what we would want you to know. And here's the foundation of that knowledge. So very much not just a practical publication, based on an author or a collection of authors' experience, but a well-researched publication as well. And you'll find this consistently throughout the entire book. Again, this is probably one of our favorites. It's a real go-to reference. There's probably about a dozen or so books that we would consider at this level of depth of research, the lucid discussions, the meaningful illustrations, as well as kind of it fits the range of different practitioners. So if you're just beginning, this becomes a very, very useful resource. And if you've been at this for a while, this becomes the book, the reference that you can go back to, to kind of revisit and say, well, what am I missing, or how can I step up my game? And this book itself becomes something, that you'll find yourself going back to again and again. So I know that it's one that we've used extensively over the years, and we would strongly recommend it for any practicing enterprise architects, research library. So there you have it. Mark Langhorst and Company, Enterprise Architecture at Work. This is 4th edition. Again, we find that this is a book that has endured over the years, and while we've always followed this and look forward to when they do an update and a review, any of the versions you'll find really have held up over the years. Just the lucid examples, the discussion, the analytics that they've suggested in the book are all very useful as far as helping to round out an enterprise architecture practice. And whether you're a beginner or somebody who's been at it for quite a while, this is a resource that we have found has always got some kind of value, something to contribute to your efforts. So again, I'm Court Coghill, and with the FIAC Institute, thank you, and we look forward to doing future reviews with you.